Rabbits. Welcome back to Philosophy for the People and the Pat Flynn Show. We're here with Dr. Jim once again for Freaky Friday.
I just got a notification on my phone about a couple of tools starting a live stream. So
yeah, here we are. You guys can call me T-Bone, your host, and
Sire
over here, and we're ready to rock. So we're gonna jam a little bit, and
thanks to you, we already have rocked.
Yeah, we have, man. And I'm gonna circle back to that in a minute because I do want to talk a little bit about music today. But we're gonna talk about some of the stuff that Jim and I are working on. Just share some of, I guess, our current research and writing projects with you, and then we're gonna take your questions. So I see a lot of good stuff has already come in. So all topics are fair game: fitness, philosophy, questions about exotic cats, whatever you want to throw our way.
Man. Yeah,
we will give you a straightforward answer, or at least make something up. So,
or I'll just make up what you want to hear. There we go.
That's right. Yeah. And good stuff, man. Good stuff. So it's been dude. I don't know about you, but it's been a crazy, exhausting week over here. Full of lots of podcasts and interviews. The other day I did four different podcasts. None of them were short. Three on our channel. One on a really cool podcast called Cutting the Gordian Knot. I don't know if that episode has come up yet. We talked Problem of Evil and stuff. But I just want to emphasize, if people can't see it on my face, like the podcast and what we do here is not the primary activity of Pat Flynn,
right?
Nor Jim Madden, right? So
exactly.
If this
side hustle,
if this alone seems tiring, rest assured it is it is tiring. But it's a very small aspect of everything else I do, and it contributes absolutely nothing to keeping the electricity on at my house. So
it's true. It's a true fact. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's right.
After this, I'm just getting sushi and playing Mario Kart. That's
the
end of week's done. Yeah. So how about you, man?
Yeah. Yeah, so like I literally I had to like push students out of my office because after a lecture I gave to do this and see, for me, I mean, like this is not like podcasting is not how I make my living, but teaching philosophy is how I make my living, right? And I do find with what we do in podcasting, it has honed my teaching game in a way, like just interacting with lots of people who are, and I don't mean to offend the listener, who are uninitiates in it, right? That I haven't like formed for 10 weeks before they ask me a question and stuff like that. It's like it's actually made me better at the teaching game in some ways. I think I detect it. Yeah. But it does come at an expensive time.
Yeah, indeed. So all right, so let's before we take questions here, what in your real life, Jim, what are you working on? What kind of projects you cooking up? What are you researching?
So I've been working very, very hard on a sweep from deep half guard. Okay.
Excellent.
Like very hard. And that comes up when my half guard is going badly. It's like from my bad position. I drilled the crap out of that thing. Right.
Now you're a half guard guy.
I'm a half guard guy. Yeah. I'm trying not to be in some ways. I've been exploring a lot of daily Hevo lately, but I also have to be able to go to my A game when I need it. Anyway. And so, and I've been drilling it. But the problem is when you're drilling something at your gym, all your boys know you do it now, right? And so you don't really get that like, okay, will it work if I've actually tricked somebody into it, right?
Yeah.
But there's a good friend of mine, a really good player, really big, strong dude. I hadn't rolled with in a few weeks. He came into the gym the other night, and guess what? Boom, I got the sweep. So I know it's what you were looking for, but I have been working on that sweep and I got it. So I'm very happy, right? But other than that
is what I'm looking for, because that's part of real life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in fairness, my buddy also then subbed me with a Kimura that I didn't see coming. So, right, so hey, you I got on top, but I still lost, right? So gotta have the complete game in jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, good stuff. So you're
so in terms of writing and thinking, as I think a lot of the listeners or viewers know, I have gone down a deep rabbit hole on the UFO issue, right? And that has opened because of like these. I didn't realize there's a cluster of like serious thought from people on this that also brings up a lot of the psi issues and near death, and telekinesis, stuff like that, which I'm now like in ways that you've influenced me on the near death thing, but because of the stuff I'm reading now, I'm taking that stuff seriously in a way I had not been. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
I've like just been going through these like 60, 70 page papers. That like there's a guy named Bernardo Kastrup, right?
Yeah, yeah, he's an idealist. Uh-huh.
He's an idealist. He has a very interesting paper on idealism and survival, right? That really took me in. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm actively working on this project. Right now it's like a research stage. It's going to become a writing project, I think, at some point on the UFO phenomenon, right? And as we were talking off air, I'm not aware of a philosopher who's actually treated at book length the issues, right? And so it's going to look at like the epistemic issues of like like what would it take evidentially for us to take this seriously? And I actually think we've crossed that line, right? It's going to look at like philosophy of mind issues of like about recognizing utterly foreign intelligence, and I think that issue, and a lot of the people who take this stuff seriously, is underplayed. They don't understand how profound a problem that is, right? There'll be issues about like what this would tell us in terms of like the relation between the supernatural and the natural and meaning in life and stuff like that. So that I am actually working on like a completely batshit crazy book on.
Dude, that's amazing. Like in relation to us doing the paper on the eternity of the world debate. It's just,
I don't think these are unrelated issues, actually. Yeah.
No, they're not. Like, because are you going to bring some sort of theological resources to bear on this project? Because I mean, obviously, the sort of background worldview is going to. I mean, at the end of the day, I think one of the sort of barriers I haven't been able to cross in terms of like whether I would expect there to be other rational life forms aside from humans is whether I think God would have reason to create them. Because I'm a theist, right? And well, clearly there are other rational life forms aside from humans, right? If you're at least if you're a Christian. And then that ties into your point of like, well, how would we detect them, especially if their sort of mode of being or existence is so not ours, right? It's
the way I think of it is, so like right now, take Bob the Chameleon, God rest his soul.
God rest him, man. He was a nasty son of a. But yeah,
may he burn in hell. But I do miss him every day. But just like this has happened before. But anyway, let's just take Bob. I mean, there's a sense in which I can recognize Bob as intelligent because his hunting behavior makes sense to me because I have a need to eat, and I too was evolved to hunt. Right? His thwarted attempts at chameleon dating make sense to me, right? Because I too was evolved to date, right? Okay,
right.
But then like you take a jellyfish, like I have much less in common. I have much less common root with evolutionarily. It's harder for me to recognize like the Portuguese man o' war's behavior is somehow rational. Okay, but now we can still kind of like we can interpret it right in ways we can because
because presumably you still have a shared history.
There's a shared history there, But let's say you've got like beings now that we have absolutely no shared history with, right? And then we start like people do this in the UFO world. They start like doing kind of game theory. Well, if there were extraterrestrial intelligence, we would expect them to do this, or if they came here, we would expect their agenda to be this or that. That's all built on a game theory that is like deeply steeped in human evolutionary like survival strategies, right?
Yeah.
And who says like you have to have like relatively selfish motives to evolve, right? Just how it went down here, maybe. Okay, like who says you have to have group solidarity as part of your evolutionary history for a rational animal, right?
Right.
There's nothing a priori that tells you it has to be the case.
I agree with you, but certain naturalists are obviously take the opposite position on that. And they do it in relation to try and secure certain facts of moral experience, right?
So I think there's like this profound skeptical problem that like if there were an alien in the room with me right now, would I even be able to recognize it?
Oh heavens.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Which once again though, you start talking about like the breakdown to the natural and the supernatural. This is an interesting way of thinking about that, right? Another issues, like I this is why I put it to my wife today, and I was thinking a lot about it, is like, how aware are the fish of the birds, right? Like occasionally, like one of the fish goes missing. Okay,
help me.
Yeah, and like, oh, that's odd, right? Someone abducted our buddy.
Steve,
right? Okay, Steve. Okay, back to hunting. right? Back to fish dating, right? But like they're not aware because they have not been evolved, right, to like to interact with and understand the bird, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like I think you have a similar situation here is like how aware like could something have been in our environment perennially, and it's just like fish to birds or birds to fish. We're just not set up to like really see each other, but we bump into each other occasionally, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting thing I found out in the UFO literature is there are people that some of them people interpret as like that it might not even be extraterrestrial, right? It could just be there has been something else on the earth since us or before us, right? That is a another natural organism that we just we occupy different
we just don't have cognitive contact with.
We don't have cognitive contact, and they're and we occasionally bump into each other, and we don't make a whole lot of sense to each other, right? You know what I mean? And I think that's a fascinating proposal, right? It's a fascinating proposal that I hadn't thought of until I got into this, right? Like who says we really know what the hell's going on Earth? Right? We know what's going on. Like the fish knows what's going on in the ocean in as much as it like fits the concern of the fish, right?
Yeah.
But there could be other concerns that would frame things that would give you access, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so also you talk about like possible religious significance and stuff like that. That's one of the things I want to explore because when you get into the UFO literature and some of it's as crazy as you think it is. Okay. Right. Yeah. Look at like if you look at maybe we can't rule it out that there's something else in the water with us, right? Then maybe you get to like, yeah, it seems like we have good reason to rule it in. Okay. And okay, now like we think we have reason to rule it in, and it looks like it wants to talk to us, right? Okay. And now like keep going and like it seems like it's maybe abducting some of us, right? Okay. And then you keep going further, and you'll find this as a proposal like maybe it's been running things and we haven't known it. Do you see what I mean? Okay. And so what, like how much, like I had to put it this way, like threat though, like the UFO phenomenon has with religious significance, right? Depends how far up the evidence, like how far the evidence pushes up that chain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
And I do think if, and there's not like evidence of this, right? But this is brought up as a possibility. If indeed it turned out like, somehow there were these beings in our environment that had something to do with our evolution, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe had been running us or something like that. Because there is this problem, like the sheep in the pen probably think they run things, right?
Sure.
That would, I think, have very, very, very like troubling religious implications.
Sure, because you could just think that all the religious beliefs we have were the result of alien technology, right? Exactly. Which of course has been proposed by skeptics before, right?
Yeah.
I guess the reason I don't worry about those things is one is like I think once you open that door, you're kind of just back into a radically skeptical scenario, Jim, which seems to be the recurring theme of our show, right? Like this isn't just a problem for religious belief, guys, right? This is going to be a problem for a lot more than that. So then I wonder, okay, is this structurally any different than any of the other radically skeptical scenarios we have to deal with? And then, of course, I would consider appeals to parsimony. I think those are legitimate if you already have, say, deeper metaphysical reasons to be a theist, right? Yeah. And then to me, it's just like, well, I'm just going to go with the standard hypothesis there, right?
Unless though you have like some really good evidence that this happened.
Yeah. If you have, there's definitely a threshold, right? That
exactly.
They could be among us, and that I'm open to. But I think you would still have to take the balancing act of not opening up yourself to a self-defeating skeptical scenario across the board. You see what I'm saying, right? And it's just like this is the theme we return to so much on this show, right? Whether it's aliens, simulation hypothesis, brain in a vat, like large scale conspiracy theories, it does seem like they keep kind of swinging us back to these.
But I mean, see, I don't know that it would necessarily entail a skeptical hypothesis. Like, I mean, like, so let's suppose, like, there's some breakthrough and they show up and they say, hey, look, here's the deal. Look at our DNA, look at your DNA, right? Like you're essentially hybrids of us that we did to move you along an evolutionary path that we wanted, right? that wouldn't entail skepticism, right? That would undermine a lot of stuff, right? But it wouldn't entail some kind of skepticism. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think if you without, and I'm not saying that happened, right? But without some kind of like real game changing piece of evidence like that, right?
Yeah.
They just the entertaining the possibility that possibly our cognitive apparatus have been like altered or bred to go in certain directions by some external intelligence, something like that. Yeah, I think that would be, well, then you could like almost anything could be claimed then, and you're going to get these like kind of skeptical scenarios, right? What I'm saying is like, let's say the evidence like, starts building. Okay, there are such beings. They've been here. They've communicated to us, right? And they've told us they did it, right? That would be, I think, of that like when that would be the game changer for me. Like that
would be like a specific defeater of I think without necessarily sliding immediately into radically skeptical scenarios. And I await that moment in history. Hey gang, what's up? That would be fascinating. And it's certainly a very interesting thought to entertain. I think, man, I need to get on your page. I just need to start spending more time in like bizarre literature, right?
Yeah.
Because there just isn't enough fun in my life right now with the types of stuff that I'm reading.
Yeah.
That's good, man. We'll have to. Is there anything else you want to say about that, or where you're going with that?
No. So, but I mean, I guess as I envision the book now, that's going to be the framework. It's like in the opening chapter, I'll talk about evidence and like what background evidence does for our taking certain like low probability hypotheses seriously, right? Similar to like what we would say about miracles, right?
Right.
And then say, okay, so I think in the UFO literature, there's these levels of claims, right? That there are extraterrestrials. They've been here, right? They've communicated to us. They've all the way up to like you'll find this like they've been like running us as a species without us knowing it since for time immemorial, right?
Right.
And what I'm going to do is I'll use those hypotheses to like throughout the book, right? Okay, let's go back to hypotheses A, B, C, D. What would that tell us in this situation, right? Even though I don't think we're anywhere close to the evidential chain going up, but as soon as you say, hey, it looks like I can't rule out that they've been here, right? Then suddenly even the craziest one down the end there that they bred us, that got a little boost.
It gets a boost.
It's a little boost. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Just trying to change the conversation a little bit. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Let us take some questions. We'll just bounce around here, guys. Harry says, how do you refute moral anti-realism? Yeah, this is a interesting question, isn't it? Fortunately, most of the people that I talk with are moral realists, and the debates that we have is how do you secure that, right? So it isn't so much that we disagree that moral realism is true. It's we disagree on what the best theory is to secure that. Somebody on Twitter, Joe Atheist on Twitter the other day did tell me that all morality was a human construct. And I said I was very sorry to hear that he felt that, right?
Yeah.
It's always good to run into Joe Atheist on Twitter. So I don't know, maybe we should do some stage setting. I mean, this sort of comes down traditionally to Darwin's dilemma, right? And the idea here, Darwin's dilemma, a really good paper on this written by a lady philosopher named Sharon Street, where she's posing Darwin's dilemma to value and moral realists for naturalists who keep trying to hold on to moral realism. She's saying like, you guys really should give this up, because a lot of naturalists don't want to give up moral realism, especially if they're moral philosophers, because they realize that this is a commitment that's sort of bound up in this normative web. It also seems to just have a lot of good reasons in favor for it. However, Darwin's dilemma would say something like this, right? Is especially if you're in a naturalistic paradigm, we've come about through what Jim is talking about, right? The evolutionary process that's aimed at fitness, but not necessarily truth. We already think, if you're an atheist or a naturalist, that this paradigm causes false beliefs in us for reasons of fitness. For example, belief in God, religion, right? And then the worry is that this sort of that this acid kind of keeps burning through, right? Keeps burning through beliefs. And it doesn't stop at God, but also goes to moral beliefs. And it says, okay, well, we think that we're kind of linked up or tracking some sort of independent moral realm, whatever that is, some objective moral landscape. But really, belief in morality for the naturalist caught with Darwin's dilemma is no different than belief in God. It's something we invent. It's something that we project. And Sharon Street talks about the we should take a sort of an adaptation link, not a truth tracking link, if you're a naturalist and a Darwinist, in the sense that you should just be a constructivist, right? You should actually follow Joe Atheist on Twitter and say that what you might think by deep seeming or intuition is some type of real objective moral landscape, some real binding moral obligation. It's not. This is just something that's been hardwired. This false belief's been hardwired into you by evolution. And you should take an anti-realist position, a constructivist position, or something like that. And there's many atheists who are happy to do that. I mean, take J.L. Mackie. He called moral facts queer. He's like, this seems like we'd need some special faculty, right? That doesn't really make sense on naturalism. And he's got a famous, well-known book called Inventing Ethics. Bertrand Russell gave up his moral realism for considerations like this. Why am I not bothered by it? Because I'm a theist. So I think that all of our senses evolved. So just that I feel like my sense of sight is reliable. That evolved. I feel my moral sense is reliable because I have a metaphysical worldview that can kind of secure that. It can give a little story, as you say, right, of how we can have the truth tracking account, even while acknowledging that there's say an agreement with adaptive mechanisms. But the funny thing is, this actually links to a point you brought up, Jim, about Darwinian counterfactuals. Yeah. Right. And one of the problems for the naturalists is it seems like we could have had Darwinian counterfactuals where things could have just evolved differently. And we might have thought that fratricide or severe inegalitarianism were perfectly moral, right? That these were instances of justice. Now, we don't think that. But the Darwinian counterfactuals seem to be a real big problem for naturalists and those who want to hold to the objective moral paradigm. And then the other thing I'll say, and I've said before I let Jim chime in, is to me there's just no arbitrary breaks. Once you start to break one of our cognitive powers, you better give me a darn reason why all of them. Darn good reason why all of them aren't start breaking, right? And normativity kind of runs all the way through, So to me, you have this normative web where if you start to arbitrarily break any one of our cognitive powers, including our moral power, to me, you're kind of gonna break them all or cast doubt on all, including our reasoning power as well. So I think you will get back to this sort of skeptical, self-defeating scenario at the end of the day. So that's an opening gambit. Jim, what are your thoughts here?
I have to admit, I'm probably not as troubled by these issues as I should be. Because I'm like such an ethical naturalist by disposition, in the sense that, look, I mean, it seems to me that what generally we can read off of human biology broad senses of what makes a human life go well, and that does like all the normativity we need, right? But I'll say this, and this is why I need to like fall more towards Pat on this, is there are clearly things in our biological setup for behavior that we want to be able to resist, right, for moral reasons, right? So we can't just say, just because some practice seems to be biologically normative for us, right? So we seem to be set up for it, right? That thereby means that is all we need to know about it in terms of its actual moral normativity. Do you see my point, right? So we're probably all pretty much hardwired to be racist, right? I mean, it seems okay to, you know what I mean? And we seem to be like hardwired for all sorts of nasty stuff. Hardwire is a bad word, but like, because it's never that easy. But like, there's an evolutionary disposition towards mistrusting others, right? Like,
certainly, others have speculated that.
They've speculated on this, right? And it makes a lot of sense why, in the wild, if something's different from you, you either like run from it or kill it, right? You know what I mean? I get that. And clearly we have every reason to resist that impulse in ourselves, right? And so I think even for me, my ethical naturalism grounds out at some point when I have to admit, yeah, just because something is in the basic set of human dispositions doesn't mean it's good. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think like a lot of people on the, and I had to admit I'm not thick in the literature on this, on the moral anti-realism side, I would say, no, these are just like evolved dispositions, and all we need is the fact that they've been involved and put in the human organism for our flourishing is enough to like justify, it's all the normativity you need, right? Except that we like, look, we're clearly evolved to be tribal, and we've got every reason now we need to resist that, right? Okay, and we can see from the beginning it was wrong, right? All this stuff, and so yeah, and so for me, this is kind of like a tortured question. Like, I don't know how to put together the kind of ethical naturalism that I cherish with like the fact that there seems to be norms that transcend that, right?
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think you're too much of an ethical naturalist. Right. And we have to draw distinctions here, right? I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Sometimes people want to think that you can have normativity just from statistical normativity. No, that's clearly wrong, right? I mean, just if you just like looked at carpenters who might have statistically different number of fingers than most people, right? We wouldn't think that that's normal, right? That's the proper functioning, right? That's a good instance of a hand or something like that. So we have to draw critical distinctions. And as well, there are certain naturalists who want to try and bring in a sort of Aristotelian essentialism, right? To do what you're doing, right? Because I think we agree that we can have a sort of naturalized ethics in an Aristotelian sense. That's different than being a naturalist. But naturalists who want to bring in Aristotle, you now have to tell me a story of how that's consistent with your prior commitments, including the longstanding commitment that evolution was death to essentialism. Right now, you got to try and square that one.
It does seem though, like given what we know now about human evolution, and we've kind of got more honest about like what's in our like dispositional toolbox and stuff like that, we're going to make a selection among the natural dispositions that we want to cherish, right? And so we need a norm outside those natural dispositions.
That's correct.
To figure which ones we're going to cherish, right? And so that's why I think
that's the moral instinct is the instinct that governs the instincts. It's above the. It's not technically an instinct, right?
And this interesting thing is like what we're really running into here in a lot of ways is the debate between Kant and Hegel on ethics, right? You know, so like where you know Kant has like rejected ethical naturalism entirely, right? And like in basically like Hume has like rejected any kind of like normativity, and he's just complete ethical naturalism. We can just like trust basic human dispositions to like just to get us, you know, they're here for a good reason, so we can just trust them all the way, right? And so you've got like these two extremes, and like what Hegel is trying to do, and much of what his work is trying to find a way to mediate those, right? To find a way for like absolute moral normativity, right? That doesn't ignore though like the groundedness and disposition, right? And I'll admit I'm kind of like I'm like kind of trying to figure out how to play that tension.
Yeah, I think, well, you know where I am, right? A theistic Aristotelianism, I think, can do that. And as I've emphasized before, I don't think, as I started emphasizing in a previous conversation, sorry, we'll move on to other questions because I know we can't spend the whole episode on one, is I don't think a sort of bare Aristotelianism is enough, right? Because there's more to our moral life and our moral experience that I think demands something thicker, right? Something richer.
I agree with you, because like the way I put it is we're going to have to select among our natural dispositions, right? Okay. Yeah. Clearly, like, there's some of them in that we cannot live with saying those are normative, right? Well, okay. And then it seems like you're going to need something outside those dispositions to make the judgment.
Yeah.
I've got one I want to jump to.
Do it.
So Danny said, did somebody post a rebuttal to Jim's refutation of the simulation hypothesis? Yeah, I don't know if I don't want to call it rebuttal, because I hate that. Not I don't hate you, Danny. I hate that kind of like get 'em gotcha debate kind of talk. But yeah, John Buck, who I think is a follower of the show, did a live stream on objections to the stuff that we did on simulation hypothesis, but which is cool. I was like honored he did it, right? I'm going to be on John's, I think it's actually some other guy's show with John on Sunday afternoon. I'll let it know.
Fun.
Yeah. To talk about simulation stuff. So I think a lot of what's going on there is I think I'm misconstruing what's typically meant in like pop culture by the simulation, right? So that should be an interesting discussion. I'll make sure.
Yeah, I kind of pulled you into that conversation randomly.
Yeah, that's right. No. And it's just so yeah. I really think of it in like kind of these inevitable paradoxes that come from like Kantian philosophy, right? Which actually I'm pretty sympathetic with a lot of what Kant's doing epistemologically. Whereas I think I may be just missing what's being claimed in the simulation hypothesis. So I'm looking forward to
there's different there's hypotheses, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Anything else, there's not just one of them. So it's kind of annoying because then you have to just sort of like anything else, take them case by case. Right?
Take them case by case, yeah. So I'm looking forward to it, and and look, if I missed it, I'm happy to be corrected. I prefer to be corrected. Yeah.
And good for you, Jim, with engaging with the internet, guys. Let me just say, this goes back to the beginning of the what I said on the show. We appreciate any and all engagement, but don't consider me rude if I don't engage a lot on social media. Because why? Well, because I have 4 kids. I'm running a business. I've got an enormous amount of writing projects that I'm also doing. I've got the podcast. I've got the fitness life. I've got the music life. I've got the family life. It's just I have to just set boundaries on a lot of stuff, including social media and back and forth online, stuff like that. So it's not me being rude. It's something that I have intentionally structured into my life. And that's why we also do stuff like this, so we can just have this sort of dedicated engagement time.
Yeah. And if Danny, if you want to see John Buck's objections before we talk, I retweeted his announcement that he was doing the live stream last night. So if you go to my Twitter, JD Madden 3, you can see the link to his, and he does. I think it's just John Buck is the name on YouTube. Right, I'm sure he's got it up now.
So just to take one more in this vein, Pumpkin Pummeler says, I realized you just did a video on this. How would you reject the thought that we're living in a simulation? Just go watch that video.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't want to do it again right now. Go watch that video, but I'll also have it. I have an episode coming out, I think next week, with Catholic Answers, where they had me on to specifically talk about this. And then you'll get, I guess, another angle that I take on that episode. So there's 2, one already available and another soon to be sizable piece of the content on there. So check those out. Very good. All right, Jim, let's scroll back up here. Catholic Base says, what should we make of the many themes and parallels between Christ and Socrates? Have you meditated on this much?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just Christ and Socrates. Like, you can find these kinds of, my understanding is like these kind of figures in a lot of, ancient, and I'm going to put the scare quotes here, mythology. Okay. Right. And I do, I mean, well, first of all, though, we have to be careful, though, of making too much of the similarity between Christ and Socrates, right? Okay, because, yeah, sure, they were both put to death, right? They both like willingly accepted it, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, they're both politically transgressive, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but Socrates is not motivated by agape love, right? Okay, you see what I mean? In terms of like doctrinal content, right? There's an interesting question of like how, I know like a lot of people make a big deal of this, but how similar they are. Do you see what I mean? Okay, I do think there's something like an archetype, right? That is, the relatively weak person standing up to the relatively strong tyrannical like political system or something like that. Do you see what I mean? And I think we do see that acted out throughout history, and I think you can see Socrates very much as that, right? I think you can see Jesus as very much as that. Do you see my point? But in terms of like Christian themes, and maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see a lot of like the notion of like absolute self-giving love in Socrates.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? And that to me seems to be like what kind of distinguishes Jesus Christ doctrinally from other people in that heroic archetype that we see throughout all mythology.
Right. And then of course you also have this, striking examples of claims to divinity as well.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Yeah.
Socrates wasn't talking like that, right?
So, well, he claims that like the gods told him this, right?
Yeah. There's a difference between inspiration and identity, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know what I mean? And so, but even leaving aside like let's just be neutral on like the religious status of Christianity, right? It does seem that there's a different, like, that notion of agape self-sacrificial love that's a hard sell to the Greeks, right? That is a hard sell to the Greeks, right?
Yeah, that's always an important thing to come back to and point out, right? Is that the Greek worldview and paradigm, even though there's much to admire in it, was still a it was still a far cry from the Christian world and paradigm that we live in now, right? Especially in terms of agape love and human dignity and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
And Catholic ways, I don't mean to be snotty about the question.
No, it's a good question.
I tell you, it's so important to me. I'm just so sick of internet acrimony, right? I don't want to do it, right? So I thank you for asking the question, man.
Brendan says, thanks, guys. Thanks to you guys. I am not afraid to explore genuinely different worldviews again. Oh, awesome. Yeah, he says, I used to read everything, but then I got a bit restrictive in my content after my conversion to Catholicism. Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question, but
stages of life, man. Stages of life, right?
Stages of life, yeah. I Jim and I are fans of read and engage. I mean, almost everything. I mean, you have to be practical, right? You can't engage literally everything, so you have to set some boundaries of like, okay, this just seems too far out that it's just not even worth my time investigating. But certainly, like anything that has a venerable intellectual tradition behind it, I think is like just read the great books, right? Just read all the great books and some of the prominent surrounding figures around the great books. I think that you can only possibly benefit from that, right? And it will challenge you, but when you have your worldview challenged, I mean, this is why I think it's so important to be honest with yourself and say, okay, am I really trying to find truth here? If that's the case, then if you encounter that one of your beliefs is mistaken, then you win, right? Because then you get more of what you're after, which is truth. Or maybe you have to just refine some of your beliefs, but that's also a win because now it's more refined. Now it's but that's hard to do if you stay in an echo chamber, right? You have to allow the stress testing. You have to. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do it all the time because stuff can get exhausting, right? But you do have to do it.
You can lose your mind.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? You know. So on this point, I think we got one here. This is from Mark. What does Jim particularly like about Johnson's Saving God book? I have read it, and it does not seem so good a defense of Catholic Christian theism, at least on my first reading. Yeah, it's not intended as that, right? And once again, you could be a Catholic Christian and find much to gain by reading something that is maybe even deeply anti-Christian, right? That is not really what's going on in Johnston's book. And what do I find rewarding in that book is Johnston taught me a lot about possibilities of thinking of religion that are not necessarily picking a fight with naturalism, right? And he also does do, I think, very good jobs of like answering, like showing the facility of a lot of like anti-religious objections, right? But also taking some of them that have traction and showing how we could think about religion in a way that might be immune to these. Whether they're acceptable to a Catholic Christian, that's a different question. But I think I learned a lot from Johnston, just how to do things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. You recommended that. That was one of your 5 books, right?
Yeah, it was one of my 5. Yeah,
read this year, and that's people should check out that episode if you want to read stuff. Which brings me to the next question that I wanted to address. Another good practical one. Where did it go? It was on studying. Who had the question about studying? Anyway, the question was what tips do we have for studying? Because I get distracted too easily. So let me say a few things. One is, as far as possible, just don't have distractions around, right? So when I do my reading and my research, I have my books, I have my articles. I always print them. So I always print the articles. Poor trees. I use a lot of trees. Why? Because I don't want to read on my computer. I don't want to read on my Kindle if I can help it. Some things I just have on Kindle, so I make exceptions. Why? Because it's just so easy to get distracted, right? So I take my hard stuff, my books, my papers. I go to the basement. I go to a room and I shut the door. That's Stephen King's advice. You shut the door. You lock out all distractions, your phone, your television, even your family. It's for a while, right? Like the kids know when a door is shut, dad's not to be disturbed, except unless there's like an emergency or something like that. And then you have to regiment that, and you have to discipline yourself, and you have to build that habit. And then once you do, it will become like exercise. It will become like clockwork. But you have to be really intentional about blocking off the time and the environment. I think the environment is critical. So those would be some of my tips. Jim, how about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% all that. And two, I think you have to build like a habit of study such that what your default fallback position is to study, right? Is to read, to think, okay? Such that, if you've got 10 minutes extra, right, that you weren't expecting, that your move isn't to like grab the phone, right? It's to grab the book, right? Do you know what I mean? Or like when you're leaving for the airport to go pick someone up, you're going to sit in the cell phone lot for 20 minutes waiting. Your habit is, I'm going to bring the book I'm working on with me. I'm going to bring my notebook and like scribble out what I'm trying to work on next or something like that. I think you got to get to where that just your default, like in the moments where there are no demands on you, your move isn't to play video games. It isn't, to like text a friend. It's to like pick up where you left off reading. It's to pick up where you left off thinking, to write or something like that.
And that's where the Kindle's handy, because when I'm just even waiting in line at places, that's when the Kindle comes up and I've got the books on there.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I'm pretentious guy walking around with a book all the time. I'll admit it. Right.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. Right.
Hey, there's an interesting question here I wanted to ask. I wanted to take up. This is from Alex. Is there a Christian equivalent to the Taoist notion of learning the usefulness of being useless? I just want to mention, because I find there's a I read a bunch of Taoism a couple summers back. I'm not an expert on Eastern philosophy, but I was very moved by that notion of uselessness. And it was in one of the sayings was somebody went to a tree that had grown right into like great beauty, okay, and all the other trees around it had been cut down. And the person asked, so why have you grown to beauty and all the other trees didn't make it? And the tree replies by saying, because when I was young, I had a twisted trunk and I was useless to the carpenter, so he never cut me down. Mm-hmm. Right. And so the idea is to embrace a kind of uselessness. Right. And so that, yeah. And so I don't think it's anything to do with Christianity, but I find this really fascinating. Like one of the ways that you're like, one of the best ways to become beautiful, to like really, really achieve something of real merit, is to render yourself irrelevant to all the bullshit demands on you. Right. Did you see what I mean? Like, because I'm not, because I'm willing to renounce a certain kind of prestige in being useless to the people who want to make these demands on me. I am then freed, right, mm-hmm. to grow in the real meaningful ways. It comes at an expense. I have to be useless. I have to be irrelevant. I have to be unknown, obscure, what have you, right? But in as much as I accept the obscurity and the uselessness, I am then in some ways insulated, right, from the expense of all that, right? And I think it goes back to what we're talking about study there, right? I mean, you like, in as much as you prioritize study over other things that might be more prestigious, more useful, more interesting to other people, and would make you less obscure and better known and wealthier, all that, you're not going to study, right? And so I think you have to be willing to accept a kind of obscurity, mm-hmm. right? And I'll say that notion of uselessness has like been one of my like kind of guiding thoughts for a while now. Yeah.
Yeah. We talked was that in our Plato series, Jim, where we spent a fair amount of time talking about this theme?
Yeah.
Was that? It was probably in one of our many episodes we did on Plato. Yeah. So yeah, very cool. We'll keep storming through here. Miguel says, Pat, I read your green book. Question for you. Are there areas of your life where you don't or wouldn't apply the 80% rule? So for those who are familiar with my little green book, I usually have a copy around here somewhere so I can put the plug in, but I guess not today. I talk about, it's about being a generalist, right? So I say for most people, most of the time, it's kind of easier to get ahead in life if you're not focus on being a hyper specialist or the best in the world at any one thing, but you focus on getting good to great, or at least fairly competent across a broad range of skills, and then learning to stack those skills. That's the thesis of the book. And I say that there's this sort of rule of 80%, which is not the 80-20 rule. I distinguish between these. And I say, like, look, 80%, like, if 100% is best in the world, like 80% is like as high as like pretty much anybody would ever need to go in any skill. And what I'm trying to do with that is sort of massage people's expectations and stop them from falling into hyper specialization, because you might only need a very sort of marginal degree of a certain skill to get the boost you need from that skill in conjunction with other skills, right? So I'm trying to find a sort of minimum effective dose here to keep people focused on being generalists and not sliding back into hyper specialization, which might actually inhibit them in the long run, right? So all that is detailed in a number of pages. Now you're asking, in my life, are there areas where I wouldn't apply the 80% rule? Oh yeah. I mean, I'm totally inconsistent with my rules. There's just things that I care about that I want to be better at because I love them for their own sake, not because I'm trying to be a better generalist. I mean, philosophy is one of them, right? I just want to be as good as I possibly can at it for its own sake. Music for many years was one of those as well. Not so interested with being like the fastest, most virtuoso guitar player anymore. It's just not even in the genetic cards. But those where there are exceptions, I think there are sort of intentional exceptions now. But I would say my advice still applies for those who want to do the skill stacking thing that I talk about as a generalist. Remember, 80% for me in that book is like, this is the ceiling, right? I'm not saying you have to get to 80%. I'm like, if you're there, then like, buddy, good enough is good enough at this point.
You're there.
That makes sense, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was trying to find, somebody had a question about Jordan Peterson. I wanted to go back to that one.
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I think these things get a little bit scrambled. If you had the Jordan Peterson question, go ahead and post it again. Oh, wait, here it is. Here we go.
Yeah.
Brendan says, depending on your response, this kind of thinking has a significant connection to Jordan Peterson's work. You guys tackled Peterson before, so I wonder if this would be something worth responding to.
Okay, so I guess, Brendan, I'm going to kind of use your question to kind of say what was on my mind anyway. So, but I like a lot of what Peterson's up to. I haven't read the new book. My wife's reading the new book, but 12 Rules for Life I thought was a very good book, right? Mm-hmm. And I haven't watched a lot of his lectures and podcasts, but I've seen him on Rogan and some of this stuff, right? We did that deep dive on his discussion with Barron.
That was really good. Mm-hmm.
And look, I'm not trying to come out like anti-Jordan Peterson, because I actually think the man has like done really great things for us, right? For the world, right? And it's seemingly at some personal expense to himself and stuff like that. Although he's done pretty well for himself too. Okay,
he's done well, very well, but he when he made the decisions he did, I don't think he expected it would turn out well for him. And that's,
right. I don't think he did.
And that's what makes a difference, right?
Yeah, I think he was like, I've had enough. I'm not going to take it anymore. And damn it, I'll go back to being a short order cook if I have to. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think he's a real man. I think he's got balls like clink. Right.
Right. Yeah. Indeed.
And anyway, so I want to say all that because I want to be a little critical now. Okay. Right. And this is kind of snotty academic stuff, but here we are. Right. So I have, like, in the last year been like really doing a deep dive on a lot of like Carl Jung stuff, right? And this is something I had a sense of with Peterson with Heidegger. Even like has what I think is this really interesting footnote to Heidegger in 12 Rules for Life, which generally goes on ignored, right? But like in the last Rogan podcast, a lot of the stuff that Peterson's talking about, he's basically doing Carl Jung for you, okay? And it's well done, Carl Jung, okay? But at the same time, you've got Rogan saying, "Oh yeah, what a great idea," but I'm like, well, yeah, it's Jung, right? Do you see what I'm saying, right? Or I'll have students come to me all the time, and they'll say, like, I'm teaching Plato or something, and they'll say, "Oh, this sounds like Jordan Peterson." I'm like, well, no, it's because it's like Jordan Peterson sounds like Plato. Right. And I think he's like this very, very good teacher, and he's very, very good popularizer. I just kind of wish sometimes he would draw people, and he does sometimes, but he would draw people's attention more to the really important sources that he himself is drawing on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying he's a plagiarist. I'm not saying he's dishonest, right? But it's not about Jordan Peterson.
It didn't start with Jordan Peterson.
It didn't start with Jordan Peterson, right? There's like Jung is worried about the consequences of modernity for the very psychological health of the individual in a way, and like our loss of connection with our primal mythical past and all that stuff, with disenchantment and all these things, right? And Jung is reading the Bible in very similar ways to like what Peterson's doing. I'm not saying Peterson made no contribution. I'm not saying that, right? And likewise, like with Heidegger and even what Peterson's doing with Nietzsche and things like that. I love it. I just sometimes I kind of want a little more like, hey, I want to direct you people to what's all the resources that have been in there, right?
Yeah.
And here, and he's right to say the universities are doing terrible and they're rejecting traditions, et cetera, right? But then, okay, then please let's turn people to the traditions, not just the Bible, but like all these traditions of thought that are there. Do you see my point?
Yeah.
And I'm going to be careful because I really, really admire this man, and like the ideas he's putting out are ideas that I cherish. I just kind of want it embodied more in the common sources. Right?
Yeah. I just have to say, I just really haven't listened to him very much. I have his 12 Rules book. I think it's right over on my shelf over there. I skimmed through it and I thought, this is pretty good, and I put it down. I never picked it up again.
And I've heard Dostoevsky. He talks about a lot of people he's drawing on, but
and I've heard his ideas, but he's always struck me as as a psychologist who, when he kind of veers into the philosophical circles, you know where I'm going, right?
I mean, I think some of his veerings into philosophical circles are like extremely sophisticated and very well done, and have moved me and stuff like that. It's just, for me, I just get this little annoying thing, like, well, man, what we should do is like let's get the people reading Jung. Let's get the people reading Heidegger. Let's get the people reading,
the primary sources.
Yeah. Because I worry a little bit. It's become about like Jordan Peterson as like this great genius.
He's the guru, right?
Yeah, but he's not a great genius. He is a great drawer together of strands, right?
Yes.
Which is a kind of genius to that. And he's drawing together these strands and putting it out there. But I kind of want to call attention to the really profound sources he's drawing on.
And maybe
I'm not saying he never does it either.
And maybe I'm wrong, because I'm still, I guess, somewhat affected by, he had this, the one thing I did listen to from Peterson a long time ago, because people kept sending it to me, was this discussion he had with Sam Harris. Like, one of his first discussions with Sam Harris, and that thing was just a train wreck of a conversation. So some of that lingers, and it was a train wreck on both fronts, for many reasons that you might expect. But I think he's a great man, and what I like about Peterson is that he really does seem to be a guy that is just genuinely trying to get things right. Right? He's struggling on many fronts. I know that my understanding is he almost died, I guess, not too long ago, and there was a whole bunch of issues. And I think his wife was diagnosed with cancer. So like, he's a man who's he's into depths of suffering on many fronts, and
he's living life,
and he's willing to have conversations with really everybody, which I so appreciate. I mean, he'll have a conversation with Sam Harris, dude who hates religion, and he'll have a conversation with Bishop Robert Barron, a Catholic bishop. And like, this seems to me like this is a model. This is a man who's really just trying to make his way through the world and try and get things right, even if he says things that I think are just, I don't know, sloppy.
And I know we're not here like to do necessarily like podcast criticism like a movie critic does, but I think there was a similar limitation that both Goff had and Peterson had on their recent appearances on Rogan, in that neither of them really slowed down to teach, right? Okay, and they had, you could tell, like, they had certain ideas they wanted to get out, right? And they were like cutting to punchlines, okay? And there was a lot of things in the recent Rogan podcast that Peterson was talking about. I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes sense to me, and maybe like 5 other people are going to listen to this thing, right? Because you haven't slowed down and actually like said, hey, let me give you the background in Carl Jung here. Let me give you the background here and something else, so we can like approach this, right? It's like he wants to do too much. He wants to get the message out there, and maybe he wants it to be his thing. I don't know. And I think you had similar thing with Goff. Like he never really hooked Rogan on the basic problem of subjectivity, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, yeah, I haven't heard the conversation, but
yeah,
I could see.
I do think that there's a kind of patience these issues need. That
I mean, how are you just going to dive into panpsychism on Rogan's podcast? Like, how are you going to?
Exactly. Yeah. It would take a kind of patience, and it would have to not be about you getting your view out. It would have to be about, I'm actually going to educate on this. And even if I can't like get 3 hours of my stuff, right? You know what I mean? Right. And I think it's another one, like once you get a certain level of notoriety, like maybe with a guy like Goff, or like certainly with a guy like Peterson, there's a temptation. It's now about my stuff, not my carrying this tradition forward.
Yeah. And like Rogan again, and he has these long form podcasts. So like you presumably would have the time to teach and try and lay out some of the basics and fundamentals. Rogan again is a guy that I appreciate as a model in the sense that he seems to be somebody who's just trying to hear different perspectives and get things right. Now, look, I disagree with Joe Rogan like fundamentally on a lot of different things. But I do see it as a shame that he's now, I guess, been seen as a threat to the established. Like apparently they're trying to cancel Joe Rogan now, or something is the newest thing. Yeah. I don't ever really listen to his podcast just because I don't listen to really any podcast. I don't have a commute, but I know he's got a strong fan base of people that appreciate that he's willing to have conversations like Peterson, right?
Yep. So it says an example here from YouTube Punk here, right? What did Jordan Peterson mean, I take it, by the Bible being the literal first book? This comes up in the Rogan podcast, right? He's talking there in Jungian archetypical theory here. You could even like see like Heideggerian deep ontological categorical talk here. And the idea is that in order for us to be able to have common communication, okay, in order for us to like speak to each other, there has to be a backdrop of given meanings, right? And not just meanings, but norms. Okay, there has to be something like a canon of meanings and norms, right, that allow for communication to go on, right? And like what Peterson's saying, we talked about this in our own discussion of the Bible on the show here, is for us, the Bible is the first book in the sense that it is whether you like it or not, it is, or at least was, the canonical backdrop that allowed us to have a norm for the very meanings of our words, right? That gave us a structure of what conversation looks like, or what the issues are in human life. What are the archetypes that we can pursue or like interpret our behavior and the behavior of others in terms of, right? And Peterson is defending this idea that we cannot get life off the ground on our own. There has to be a given set of meanings, norms, etc., in the background that we hold to, right? That's what books are. And like the more central the book is, the more prime it is, right? Okay. And that's what he means. And so I think that's very profound, but he didn't like really take the time to explain that. Right.
Yeah, good. Here, let's take this one from Ben. He says, can we argue from the self-defeatingness of a position to its being false? And the answer there is it depends on the level of self-defeat, right?
Literally contradictory? Or
yeah, if it's literally contradictory, yes. Like if somebody says there's no such thing as objective truth, and we ask, is that true? And they say yes, then that level of self-defeat, I think we could say is necessarily false. However, there's other levels of self-defeat. Take Plantinga's proposed undefeatable defeater of naturalism, right? What Plantinga's saying, if you follow, I'm not saying you have to agree with his argument, but if his argument worked, then the type of self-defeat Plantinga's proposing for naturalism is a rational self-defeat, that even if naturalism were true, we could never know that it's true. And Plantinga is clear about that this level of self-defeat doesn't show that naturalism is false. It would just ruin the conditions of knowledge where we could never know that it was false. So it might still be true. It's just not something that could be affirmed rationally, giving his argument. Right. So yeah, there's different levels of self-defeat one could encounter. And some, I think we can say, yes, it is a clear indication that it's false, but not always the case. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Cool. We got time for one or two more maybe here. Jim, you see anything else you want to pluck out? Thanks for the great questions as always, guys. This is really good stuff. You got somebody for your book here, Jim, a case study.
YouTube Punk. I'm going to help to make sense of this with you. So stay tuned. Stay tuned, friend.
Stay tuned, my friend. Meow says no disrespect to Jordan. This is more of a comment, but his work in philosophy of religion is underwhelming, but his psych and cultural works are great. Yeah, and I guess the fair thing to say there is he's not a philosopher of religion. So
yeah.
Now that's not to say you have to. I want to be careful here, right? Because I don't think I don't even want to say about like Neil deGrasse Tyson because he's not a philosopher that he can't say anything intelligent about philosophy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's not true. Right. There's many people I know that are not professional philosophers that are actually very intelligent philosophers. Yep. Right. And it's because they take the time to study the relevant material and the literature and they think really hard about it. The problem is just that isn't often what happens. Right. Sometimes people just think, well, because I'm an expert over here, I can just opine in these other areas and then they make themselves look like fools. Right.
Yeah. So, as you know, I generally don't use my title. I can't stand it. Right. Okay. I kind of shock my students with that. And I have a fairly low view of academic expertise. Okay. And I'm like, look, I'm perfectly happy to be corrected by, someone who's not a professional philosopher. In fact, I'm going to go talk to John Buck to see what I can find out about that. Right. And so like, I mean, it's not like, okay, so it's not like philosophy has some like special technique, right? In the way that like you have, in order to like just even begin to understand like, modern physics, you're going to have to like really, really, really learn a lot of mathematics and things like that. And I think one can think their way into philosophy pretty deeply without like formal academic training, right? Now, what being a professional philosopher does is it gives you a very, very easy job so that you can spend a lot of time doing that, right? I mean, that's really what it does. Okay. And so I'm happy to like, I don't care if Jordan Peterson has a PhD in philosophy or, psychoanalysis. If he's thought his way into it, those become relevant claims. I just want to look at what's the claim being made here. Now, where I do get annoyed, and it's not with Peterson, but is when we have people who are making claims as if there wasn't a history of thinking prior to them. That, as you can tell on the show, that triggers me, right? Yeah, right. That really does trigger me, right? Because it just shows a kind of lack of education. Do you know what I mean? And I think anyone can be educated, whether you work in a university or not. But that kind of arrogance that I'm going to make this claim, and I'm just assuming no one has ever thought this through prior to my generation or me, right? And I'm going to be too lazy to look into it, right? That gets my goat.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you can find plenty of professional philosophers that carry on like that too.
Right? Oh yeah. I mean, there's plenty of people who've got their PhD in philosophy that are complete morons. Many of my philosophy professors were. I'm just have no hesitation about saying that. There was one I want to take that was just at least one fitness question. Yeah. At least one fitness question today. Ryan says, I can't seem to progress on my pull-ups beyond 10 reps. What do you suggest? You need to start weighting them if you haven't already. So I would recommend that you have at least 3 training sessions per week. You have a day where you just you focus on intensity. So you put the weight belt on. I'd recommend a weight belt rather than a vest because a vest can sometimes distort the shoulder mechanics. And you do a lot of heavy sets, right? Then you have another day where you do body weight, but you really kind of push your max reps. And then you have a third day, which is just kind of greasing the groove, general practice, not trying to do too much at one time, but you're just focusing on accumulating volume. Having that wave and that fluctuation in your training, especially once you're kind of stalled out on the body weight in terms of reps, I think you need to start increasing the intensity and adding weight to at least 1 pull-up training session per week. Jim, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I'll say this is when this is one of K Black's things is he's big on, if you want your upper pull-ups, you do a weighted for a little while, and you won't necessarily, like, say you do 6 weeks of weighted pull-ups. The first time you jump in the bar and do body weight, he doesn't expect you're going to see a big bounce in terms of your raw number of reps you can do. He thinks you then have to kind of like train yourself back into the rep stuff for a week or 2, and then you'll see your bounce. So I 100% weight them, but don't think it's going to like go bang. You have to like get back in the groove of doing higher reps. And then, and in my experience, when I want to get my pull-ups like up, like into the 20s, I work on my max rep pull up for like 6 weeks, and then I do ladders for like a week or two, and bang, I'm right back to where I wanted to be. Yep.
Awesome. The hour has flown by.
It has flown by,
Jim. So before we wrap this session up, anything else you want to announce or make mention of, or tell the good people to stay tuned for, or?
Yeah, no, I'll make sure I when I know exactly where it's going to be, I'll publicize my chat with John Buck.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah. So other, I should mention other podcast appearances. This is sort of problem of evil week. So I did 2 long conversations on other podcasts on the problem of evil. One was on the Logos project. So if anybody's interested in these topics and you want to hear me wag my jaw on them, and the other one is on the Gordian knot. I think one is already out. Another one is coming out. I'll try and link them in the show notes afterwards. Check out philosophyforthepeople.com, our new website. I will have some new blog material coming on there and the Substack here soon. I've actually been thinking, Jim, and writing a little bit more about the naturalistic ethics and whether this sort of Darwinian acid can be contained. And I'm arguing this is a real difficulty. It's something that needs to be taken seriously. So that's all that's coming on my front. There he is. Speak of,
cool.
So you and John will be having a conversation here on the simulation.
Yep. On the drive.
Simulationism. Cool. Very cool. Excellent.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that too. That's so cool. I'm glad you did.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in.
I'm still like, I'm still now, like, I don't get offended if people are criticizing me. I'm like, my gosh, somebody listened. That's cool. Right. I'm still at that.
It's just like, once you've been doing this, and you've been doing it a lot longer than I have, especially professionally. It's just like, I mean, it's all you do is get criticized.
Yeah.
It's a philosopher. That's just all it is, right?
I think though, and it has nothing to do with the talk with John, but I think before I started doing with these, I was naive though. Like I wasn't spending that much time on the internet, right? And I wasn't a social media guy. I think I was naive to how acerbic this is, even in like philosophical circles, right?
Yeah,
I think I was naive. Yeah.
So that's interesting because, for better or worse, I've been on the internet and putting out stuff on the internet since a very young age. So I've become calloused to it, like even like my old stuff, and like even when I first started just publishing, articles and blogs back, like late high school, early college on everything, just yeah, I guess I'm just used to being hounded, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's just like another day at the job, right?
I'm more used to like beard scratching. Something would say that,
Yeah. See, I grew up with all like the petty, just like personal attack type of stuff from the internet. Like I was born in it. I was molded by it, as Shane would say, right? It's yeah. Definitely not saying that is what's going on with anybody here. Fortunately, we've got great people listening to this channel. We appreciate all your engagement, all of your thoughtful comments and questions and criticism, all that, and we'll pick it up here next week. We got Aristotle coming again, and whatever. So, by the way, if you're listening on the Pat Flynn, I guess kettlebell channel, be sure to subscribe to the Philosophy for the People channel if you're not already, because lots of good stuff happening over there that is not being shared across platforms anymore. We've got Aristotle's Ethics. We're coming up on book 4. Series there, and just a ton of good interviews and lots of stuff. So please head over and subscribe. Catch you guys next time. Adios.